right there.
Cool. So we're gonna do Crazy Eights. I have two important things to tell you about Crazy Eights. For me, I have like strict manifestos on the things that I stand on point. Number one is that no warm-up game should have eliminations. Read my manifesto for that. Number two is that Crazy Eights involve hips because there's like this whole middle section of the body that I don't know why we would ignore. So I do hands, midsection, legs. Okay, great. That's the logistical fact thing that you need to know. Then for this time, what we need to know as we think about transitioning through spaces, we're gonna go from like what a Crazy Eight. We're gonna go from 8, who's gonna be our Crazy Eights if we were like backstage opening night. We go on in 5 minutes, so like we gotta be really quiet with this Crazy Eights because the audience is out there and they're gonna hear everything, right? Then we're gonna kind of transition through. I think the four range is like Crazy Eights in the classroom. I'm aware of the fact that Mr. Suarez is teaching geometry across the hall and hates when we get too loud, but also like, we need to get the energy up, so we're like in our moderate range. And then like the 8 is when we have just finished a grueling tech and we're about to do our first run and the energy is low. And I'm like, all y'all get out and choose a space in the theater. I need you to fill the space as loud as you can, right? So that's gonna be our flow. Feel me? Great, fantastic. All right, ready? Here we go. Can we close up this circle? I feel alone. Thanks. Right, the camera.
Yeah, I was like,
sorry, you gotta go. We can't. It's over the shoulder. It's messing with me. All right, here we go.
For District 75, and I'm excited to be here today. I'm with my two esteemed colleagues.
Hello, I'm Andy Von Merchant. I just do Crazy Eights.
And I'm Michael Angelo, District 75 theater teacher.
Excellent. So welcome. We're very excited to meet all of you today. So just as a quick reader of the room, we just want to know who's with us today. So how many elementary theater teachers do we have? Ooh, very nice. Middle school. High school. Ooh, I love it. Classroom teachers. Oh, you mean like ELA, math, social studies. Okay. Do we have any other art form teachers? OTs, PTs, paras, related to us. Oh, okay, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. So one of the things that we wanted to share with you is we just wanted to tell you how we got to this place of talking about transitions from different environments and why we thought it was important. So Michael and myself work on a program called the All-In Teen Theater Program. Our theater ensemble, I apologize, you can add to that. And the piece of what we saw is that there were about 14 students who have IEPs in the cast. There were 5 students who were part of language programs in transition schools in D79 that are, learning English for the first time, have recently moved here to the United States. And we also had 2 deaf actors. So in the cast of 25 kids. And there are also a lot of adults. We had interpreters there for different languages. We had interpreters for the deaf actors. We had myself, Michael, and our colleague Marissa for the students with IEPs, and then teaching artists that supported the creative direction of devising the show. So Michael was actually the co-artistic director. He's a mastermind of devising. And so one of the things that we saw was really looking at the structures and supports that we needed to add into the environment so that students could thrive in this space where there was a lot of adults, a lot of students, and what that looked like in 2 different rehearsal spaces and then on stage. So one of the things that, just to give a little background, my expertise is working with students with moderate to severe disabilities. And so one of the things that I really like to open a space with is thinking about our educational philosophy. And thinking about that our thoughts and perceptions of students and our belief structure really comes out when we're teaching. So, and a lot of what happens is we really need to be reflective in our educator, or when we're talking about our practices and understanding how the choices we make directly impact a student's ability to thrive in an environment. So we're gonna quickly share ours, and we'll give you guys about 30 seconds to a minute to think about it. We don't want to spend too much time on it, but we just want to think about our mindsets in situations and how this will guide a lot of the work that we're going to talk about in our session today. So for mine, I believe that all students learn, and I believe that they learn whatever we teach them. They learn to be confident, they learn to be communicative, they learn to be socially engaged, but they can also learn to be completely dependent on us. So we need to be very mindful of how we set up the structures in our classrooms for students.
I believe in meeting the student where they are, each student where they are.
I believe that all information delivered to students is received, and that my job is to accept every offer that comes from them.
So we'll just give you a second, 30 to be specific, to think about your educational philosophy and how that comes out and how you educate your students. Does anyone want to share? No pressure, you don't have to. That's all.
All students can learn. All students don't learn in the same way. They need clear instructions, they need clear guidelines to follow, and they need support even when they're struggling. But struggle, they do need to have a little struggle so that they can learn. Yes.
All students need to feel welcomed and valued in order to learn.
In the same vein that all students and people can learn, all students and people can perform. The ways their performances are going to look are going to be different. The context in which they will perform can definitely be different, but everyone can perform in some way.
Anyone else? Oh, perfect.
Kind of along what you said. I like reinforcing the celebration of rehearsal and failure being a necessary part of the process. So just reinforcing when things don't go well to students that they are on the right track and that it's normal and actually a requirement of where we're going.
I also feel mistakes are an important part of the learning process, and that practice makes permanent and never perfect.
Part of my responsibility with my students is pushing them beyond a limit that they have set themselves, that they are unaware that they have set. When I've seen that that's their own self-limitation and they can do more, even if it makes them uncomfortable for a little bit, because I think at the end of the day, the payoff is what I'm there to do.
Thank you for sharing that. I know I don't like putting people on the spot, but I appreciate all of you for sharing your philosophies because it really does impact. It aligns a lot with CRSE and our beliefs of students and how that comes out when we're working with students, especially those with IEPs, right? And so one of the things that we just wanted to give they are having so much fun out there. One of the things that I wanted to start out is just giving a little bit of background knowledge that is going to help us think about some of the structures and strategies that we're going to add that we're going to talk about that are part of the case studies that we're discussing today. So one of the things that, this is part of the special education law of the Article 200 law specifically in IDEA. So we talk about specially designed instruction. And specially designed instruction is very unique to an individual student. It's very much based on what we see in a student's IEP. So it's really thinking about the choices that we're making instructionally to support those students so that they can thrive in an environment. But it also is thinking about those strategies and methodologies as we deliver instruction, but that structure of the physical space and how we're working on adding in we're going to give you some examples, but adding in some structures like embedded schedules and things that we're going to get into more detail, but really adding in options for students so that they can thrive. This is one step above differentiated instruction, because everybody's familiar with differentiated instruction, right? So differentiated instruction, group think, right, dividing students and making adjustments for that. Specially designed is one step higher on that pyramid, where it's more specific to the individual students. Which leads us to the thoughts of universal design for learning. Is that everybody familiar with UDL? Is anybody not familiar with UDL? Oh, perfect, this is great. So, UDL is that thought, I love it. A couple years ago, it was like, people
Okay, we have one person who's not familiar.
I'm also not that.
Great.
I mean, I don't know if I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I love it.
Like, I might know it by a different name.
Yeah, so universal design for learning started out as like a construct in thinking about creating accessible spaces. So it used to be universal design, and then they added the L for learning. And so taking that model into making informed decisions of how we're changing a strategy to teach a student, that change specific to one person can benefit everyone. So a very big example of that is a curb cut, that it was designed specifically for people who use wheelchairs, but it benefits people with strollers, it benefits people who use grocery carts, it benefits bicyclists, it benefits, people who use, other accessible forms of travel. And also it's gone even further. Even the grid systems that you see help with directionality for people who are blind or have low vision to go in the correct direction when they're crossing the street. So there's a lot of added benefit. What was designed for one has helped a plethora of people in the environment. So when we think about supports for students in the class, like the largest base, it's universal design for learning. The second tier is differentiated instruction, where it becomes more specific. And like the greatest specificity is that specially designed instruction, where it's very unique and tied very directly to a student's IEP and what structures and strategies they need to thrive in environments. So today we're really going to focus here on action and expression. So these are the 3 tiers of universal design for learning. So it's thinking about engagement and how are we engaging the students. It's thinking about the representation and what that looks like in the environment. I'm sorry to consult. So thinking about ways of access and supports and what that looks like. It could be pictures, it could be visual cues. We do that all the time in theater. We have polyspots, we've got pictures, we've got things blocked out on stage. And then thinking about action and expression. So we're going to be looking at these 2 areas today. So the whole day is about structures and strategies that you can bring into the space to help students thrive, and how sometimes when we're thinking of how these systems and structures or strategies and structures work, they may work in the classroom environment, and when you go to the auditorium, it's a whole new ballgame, right? And Michael and I this year, and Donzel used to work with us, so I have to give him a shout out, and he's coming back, he has to. And one of the things that we saw that the rehearsals were from January to April, 5-hour rehearsals on Sunday, and which is a very long period of time, right? And when we're working with students, we realized that we had to really embed a lot of structures and really look at a lot of strategies to support the students. And then when we moved into a different space, we almost had to start over. However, a lot of them transitioned, they just looked slightly different. So one of the things that we really wanted to talk about to just kind of frame the session today is that when we talk about the nature of disability and of different disabilities and the students, we know that everything is very specific and very individualized, but you may encounter students who need a longer time to process information, right? So that means when we question, we give directives, or we ask a student a question and we're looking for a response, we're waiting for that student to receive what we call receptive language, that information, their internal processing of that information, and then how they're expressing that. Whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, kinesthetic movement, eye gaze, whatever that is, that processing time might need to be longer. Another nature that you may encounter is students who have sensory sensitivities, right? And that heightened anxiety that comes along with external stimuli, like loud noises, lighting, transitioning to different spaces. One of the things that we encountered, that is often encountered, is I was just reading an article that was talking about some people who have autism, they may experience a heightened anxiety, that they're spending a lot of time as de-escalating themselves and having an opportunity to understand how they're feeling in a space, so that it may require additional energy or additional supports to thrive in that environment. But given a directive that is outside of their choice, that can spark a reaction, right? And so thinking about how we're framing our classes to support students and what their response to that stimuli, whether it be like our direction, whether it be the environment, what choices are we making so that students thrive? So these are some structures to the physical environment that some teachers have added that have been very successful in working with students who, for anyone, to decrease anxiety, to know expectations. As Donzel shared in his educational philosophy, he was talking about clear expectations. Like, are we really relaying clear expectations to the students? So this is something that we use quite frequently that's called an embedded schedule. And this is the entirety of a 48 or 52-minute class. And it marks out everything that's happening in the classroom. And so it's basically taking your period and chunking it into segments. And what happens is this is all on a list and it goes into a finished bin, right? And when that's happened, it notes that that task is over and we're moving on to the next. So as the class goes on, you're seeing that there's fewer things that we need to encounter. And so one of the things that I wanted to share is that we focused on, Michael and I's expertise is really in working with students with moderate to severe disabilities and students with IEPs, but with the reimagining of special education that's happening right now, we're going to see more students in community schools closer to their home that need more supports to thrive in an environment. And so we just wanted you to be aware of all kinds of different supports and services that we can provide. So when we think about this, it just denotes that the task is finished. You can take it one step further, and we call these are additional visual cues, or it could be first then, or first, next, last. So these may be where we've broken down the class into chunks that a student needs more supports. And so this is just like step one, step two, first, then next. They can be called whatever the student needs, or it can be with pictures, right? So first we go center, second, center, and then we sing. So giving that direct, those visual procedures.
For high school, you don't break it down, do now, and everything. You still use the students going to be at work before, would you break that down?
Oh, with the do now and stuff?
Yes, you know how we break down lessons.
Oh, so what you could do now, oh my gosh, I just blanked on teachers college. Yeah. It would be like do now, share. the next part is like mini lesson, share, mini lesson, independent practice, right? So you could say, first it could be do now, next, share out, the mini lesson, whatever you're doing. It could be, theater games.
Last time I used that was when I worked at the treatment center without
Oh yeah.
reframing it.
But you can totally do that. Or if your students are at a place that it could be, thinking about first, next, last, it could be do now, mini lesson, independent practice, group 1, group 2, group 3. You can but you can add visuals if you need. If the students need visuals, you can add visuals.
Feels like that would be an excellent place for judicious use of parentheses, so that you're also framing it for if anyone were to come in. I know y'all are always worried about
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Like to be like, this is the same framing. This is my lining up is the equivalent of my do now, which is also so that everything's framed that way would be.
Because it could be like if your do now is ensemble building.
Yes, however you want. And also, I think it would also help the students and the other teachers, because they're like, well, we're in this form, and you're like, we're still in that form. We're still in this form, it just looks a little bit different, but we are still very much in the form that we're using everywhere else.
Yeah, because your independent practice piece could be very specific, like script review, choreography, vocal rehearsal. It can be very explicit to what you're doing. Like the do not to be like ensemble building. Like you can change it to be your theater terminology to kind of help people when they walk in the room, like understand what piece of theatrical practices you're doing within that model of it's TC. Yeah. The next one, this is our highest level of support, where this is an independent station that the students could be working on something. They could be using this for props. That first they use this bin. When it's completed, they put the tab here to denote that they're finished and go on to the next color. So it's a very explicit system. You can use for directionality polyspots. And you may not be able to see it when you can see these slides, that they're noted with symbolic representation of cues of where they lay on the stage. If a student needs a support where it's their picture or their name, that can be added to the polyspot so that it can be placed quickly and removed on stage. But it's a lot of those visual cues, so students have an understanding of where am I going. Sometimes we're in a large open space in the theater classroom or when we're in an auditorium, and it's understanding where my body is in space and what is the expectation of where I go. So these create a boundary for students to identify in a direction for them to move towards. Sometimes a polyspot is not enough. Maybe we use a polyspot when we're singing in a choral space, but if we're acting or dancing, we may need a larger boundary for students to understand that I can move in this space. And I'm understanding where my body is in proximity to my other classmates. So another piece, this is Michael's famous Stage in a Bag. It's pretty fantastic. And
Yeah, this is just for anyone who gets pushed out of their auditorium or out of their stage and have to go. So this is basically the 9 spots on the stage. And from that, I generally have like a border around it. These become really important. These represent the audience. So, and then this also represents the whole stage for my students that choose to be non-speakers, so that they can have a voice of where they're going. So wherever I am, I just put that out. And then as we're getting closer to in tech and rehearsals, I just start pulling away supports as much as I can. But that's with me all the time.
yeah, and one of the things is it's very mobile and it has a visual boundary of the stage, right? If you want the students to focus their scene on, stage left or stage right or center, you can create that boundary for the students so that they know where the expectation is of where they're moving. This is great for props and costuming. It's really looking about how things are labeled, that they're clearly labeled. You can go so far as having a matching receptacle where you're giving the students the cue of, go get these materials, and they're going and finding them so that there's not that there's a clear understanding of where they are. And you can even go one step further, that there's other PD that we do on this, that it's ecological inventories, where you can look at how have you set up your space so that students can independently access all of the materials that they need. Here's one step that students may need, especially when we're blocking out our tables for props, is thinking about, do they have a notation of their cue, or do they need their picture? You know, so that they're able to identify where their materials are.
Will we be getting
Of course. Here's my email. Email me directly and I will send them to you.
Okay.
For sure. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about when we go through the case study is that we had these 3 students that we're going to talk about are exceptional actors. They are really phenomenal. As Michael said in the last breakout, they are theater kids, right? They're awesome. And so one of the things that we realized is that we really had to take note, and I was saying in the last session that a few of the students, it was like really putting your money where your mouth is, you know, and really thinking about like how can we support this student to make sure that they're thriving in the environment. And so we're gonna go through some case studies to talk about how some students were engaging with the rehearsal space and then some of the structures that we put into place in the classroom, and then how some of those structures needed to be adapted for the auditorium space. So one of the things that we wanted to share with you is that if students, not always, but if a student has an IEP, one of the pieces that may be in there, not all students have an FBA VIP, so a functional behavior analysis is an analysis where we're trying to determine behaviors for the student and what is the triggering behavior, or what is the antecedent, what is happening before, and what do we need to add into place into the environment to help the student, or to support the student. So if a student has, if a functional behavior analysis has been performed, a student will have something called a behavior intervention plan. And if the student has one of these, and if the student has an IEP and has one of these, this is like the mothership. It will tell you everything, absolutely everything that you need to do to support the student in their environment. Everything's written, you know, and it's amazing, and it's the entire IEP team and the counselors and everybody involved, and the student talking about what supports they need to be independent and completely engaged and to thrive in an environment. So this is an incredibly helpful tool if a student has one, and they're also in the present levels of performance if a student has an IEP. And so if you work with that student, you're entitled to have access to that, so just find whoever in your school is in charge of IEPs and make sure that you're on that list so that you can get into CSIS and access all this information. They collected on something called an ABC chart. And so we're just running our case studies kind of this way. So if I say the word antecedent, that just means what happens before the behavior. The behavior is what's happening, the facts of what's happening, and not my emotional connection to it where I'm like, he was mad, or he was that, you know, it's very much just like what happened. And then the outcome, sometimes referred to as the consequence, but the consequence is not a negative, like a removal of something. The consequence or the outcome is just like what happened after the behavior. So in this case study, we broke it down when we were talking with the students, where it was large group, small group, and transition to different spaces. So as we said before, a little different than a classroom where it's 52 minutes, 5 hours. So we had, for this first student, quite possibly my favorite human on the planet, Michael Princess, love, like the love is deep. And so during the first part of the class or rehearsal, it was a vocal warm-up. I'm sure you can picture it. Piano playing, 30 students singing, loud volume, and a lot of the teachers and supports saying, "We can't hear you, sing louder," right? And we know how we feel when we're performing. And just the nature of theater and rehearsal space can, kick up a lot of anxiety just in general, right? And so combining that with people who, this student had a lot of anxiety, this student had sensory sensitivities. And so the behavior, the student said, I hate singing, the student went behind the curtain, the student sat in the windows of the rehearsal space and closed the shutter and covered their ears. What happened after is peer attention was provided, adult attention was provided, and the task was avoided. In small groups, we're in a room about this size with 3 groups happening, and we're practicing lines. There's 3 groups practicing lines in the room, so there's like a lot happening. It's a louder volume, and the student was given directives to the script, and how to reread lines, or the tonality of the lines, or make sure you're reading this line correctly. Student said, no, I'm not doing that. Student placed fist firmly on the table, student covered their ears, student walked around the perimeter of the rehearsal space. Adult attention was provided, peer attention was provided, and the task was avoided. Transitions to different spaces. We had an auditorium space and we had 2 different breakout rooms. The student was given directives to move to another room, practicing moving from space to stage, and they were given directives on how to deliver their lines. The student left the stage area, the student said no to the directives, the student used a loud voice to say no, I know what you're doing. Peer attention was provided, adult attention was provided, and the task was avoided. So remember what we were talking about before, where sometimes the response is not necessarily just that the student is being what they would call as like oppositional, or the student was defiant. The student, we know from working with the student, has anxiety, and we found from working with them that it was really giving the option of choice. And choice is very important when students are trying to, when students are really looking at how, like, what is the expectation of myself in this space, and how am I de-escalating myself, or how am I understanding how I am in this space, right? And so we really looked at giving these structures, and this was very much tested and trialed during this time. Every week, one of the things that we did have for this student, like I said before, the time frame of rehearsal was 5 hours. So we realized that we had to really support the student in building the stamina to be able to be with us for that long. So we started the rehearsal spaces, and it was something that the students was very much part of the conversation, and as was the parent, that we started the rehearsals after 2 sessions, that the student came for 2 hours, and then so we made sure that all of the work that was done with those groups and everything was done in those 2 hours, and then the other students stayed for 5 and they were released. And then we would continue to have them come longer each time as they were building stamina across the course of rehearsals. So the structures and support in the classroom, so we started with that, but we also had a full rehearsal schedule for everybody that was noted with times and what was happening during each of the individual segments of class. And then we also noted explicit timestamps of breaks. We had a mini breakout group schedule. So we had the full rehearsal schedule, but we also had what explicitly was happening for that student in their small group, so that they were able to know, what they needed to finish. We had choice and directives, which was very clear, which was, for example, thinking about that choice and directive is when we were working on having the student be in a certain part of the space when we were doing the staging, that saying, you have the option of saying center, or center, or downstage center. So it was still in that same proximity of where we wanted them to be, but they had the choice in where they were going. So just like very simple things that still gave students the authenticity of choice. Oh, there you go.
Just did that.
It just did that. Well, let's see. Huh. Interesting. So, hold on. That's wild. Oh, Caroline, sorry. Okay. So, I'm just gonna go. Michael will fix it when he comes back. So, one of the other things that we talked about, this is gonna get real fun. So, one of the other things that we talked about was the choice, right? And then we had frequent breaks to support stamina. So while we had the rehearsal breaks that would be, because it's a little bit different, so you could think about this in the 52 minutes of your class, that maybe each segment was 10 minutes, and then like a 1 minute break for students to transition into another activity. We made sure that whatever time we said, because we knew that the student, that it would support them building the stamina over the course of time, that we wanted to honor that if we had an agreement with the students that we were taking a break at this time, that we took a break at that time. Because one of the things that we all know that we do is, let's just run it one more time. And that running it one more time might be for me and not for them, right? So thinking about what we need to do to honor the students in that space and the agreement that we've set up so that we have choice in our environment. Michael, something happened. It just went away. And so we had a quiet space for small group rehearsal, and we had a quiet space for de-escalation, where the student, we did have noise canceling headphones if they wanted it. We had some games that they could practice, but it was kind of their own time. Where did it go? Okay. And then one of the things that the student really liked ad-libbing their script, and part of the devising process was that the students write the script. And so one of the things that we would have where we had a script review was talking with the students through and saying, you know, like, you wrote this, it's an incredible piece. And one of the things that we need to remember is that us saying our lines is a cue for our friends to be able to know when to say their lines. So we need to remember to be a leader and be the exceptional actor that you are in guiding your friends in this space, because we all work together. So if you want to ad-lib this part, just make sure we say this at the end. And then after we kept doing that, they eventually just, read the line as is, as their choice. But we gave them the option of adding in a flare of tonality or, an additional word to, help them feel like they were more into the character. But that there was that agreement at the end. One of the things that happened when we went to the auditorium space is, as I'm sure that all of us in the room have had, is that we had to shift some of the structures and some of the strategies that we put in place. So some of the things that carried over is, now it's the full run of show that's up. We still have that full rehearsal schedule, but now we have an addition of a scene timeline for the student. And it was a schedule for them that noted when they were going on and off stage. This was a very simple addition. It was them having a personal script that their times or their transitions were highlighted. And that was enough of a support for that student to just know what was happening right before and what color that he could walk on the screen and what his marks were. So on their script, it was bold of the note of movement prior, and then their line sequence. Again, the choice and directives, but this was very explicit to the scene. Again, that ad-lib here, say the strip line, and a movement to that space area. We had breaks to support stamina, and this was an alternative location backstage. Just the confined space of backstage and how it was like a little bit darker, there's a lot of props, there's a lot of students, the environment can become very overstimulating, was very overstimulating for me. And so we had a space that you could walk through backstage, and there was spaces for the students to have quiet areas, and we had stage runners go back and get the students when it was their time. And then again, we did a script review in a quiet area right before the scene. So in that breakout group, there was somebody running lines and practicing with the student prior to their scene. Sorry that this is so heavy today. It's a lot of information. So our next exceptional actor. Again, the same scenarios, right? We have warm-up, piano playing, 30 students singing at a louder volume, teachers asking to sing louder. student covered their ears and the student cried. Adult attention provided, peer attention provided. And when I say peer attention, it was that the students in the class were also, are you okay? What's going on? You know, very kind, the most amazing group of students. Small group, practicing lines in small group, 3 groups practicing in a room, loud volume in the classroom. The student would leave the group and go sit in the corner. The student cried, the student held their ears and would sing the song Rain, Rain, Go Away, and then would walk around the rehearsal space. Now, what I have to say about the student, very, very, very rewarded and confident on stage. Crushed it every time, exceptional. But had a lot of sensory sensitivities to loud spaces and was affected by it. But lit up as soon as they got on stage. So it was kind of figuring out how to support before they had their moment. Adult attention provided, peer attention provided, and task was avoided. So we went into transitions to different areas. Again, the transition to move to another room, practice moving from like different spaces to the stage, and loud auditorium space. So we're now experiencing a lot of different sounds. The acoustics are different than in a classroom space, so taking all of that into consideration. Depending on how much is in the room, there's sometimes not a lot of dampening of sound when we go into these spaces. And then there's also mic checks, right? So there's a lot happening in that space. Student left the stage area with tears coming down their face, tears coming down. Student went to their parents who were there to de-escalate, and students stayed in the hallway saying no to entering the new space. So adult attention provided, peer attention provided, and the task was avoided. So again, we have our full rehearsal schedule. And the reason I keep saying the piece of that schedule that was important for the student was really understanding when they were able to go to a quiet space after, you know. We had noise canceling headphones. We were trying to work with students on their own efficacy and asking for breaks when needed. So giving that option for independence and knowing oneself and saying like as an ensemble, it's okay. It's not like, can we move on for 2 more minutes? Like if the student's asking for a break, you know, we work together to know that they're given that quiet space. Quiet spaces for small group rehearsal. So because we were fortunate enough to have the 2 spaces, we were able to have just our small group with this group of students and the other 2 groups rehearsed. Or sometimes we would just go into the hallway and practice. But the fact that it was only our voices that was kind of in our frame of control at that time. And we included quiet space during the full group breaks, because the volume during the full group breaks was something that we had to also add in. So it wasn't just during the rehearsal, it was during the break times too. So in the auditorium space, some of the things that we did was, again, it's now the run of show and we have that whole schedule with the highlight of break. The option of noise canceling headphones when needed. And we had breaks to support stamina in an alternative location backstage with a stage runner and their mom also volunteered. And so just as the transition into a new space, a lot of times that whole process starts over again. And so at the beginning stages of rehearsal in January, the mom stayed at rehearsals and that student would sometimes go in the hallway for that added support because we were all new to them too, you know, so they offered to stay so that the student felt comfortable in this space. And as time went on, the mom didn't need to be there. And so that same process happened. So mom volunteered the first couple times, the first day that we were in the auditorium space, and then the next time she was like, I don't need it, I'm out.
A little embarrassed to ask, but what do you mean by stage runner?
Oh, a person that would have an alternative space, so just a person that was aware of when the scenes were coming up, and they would go and get the students so that not everybody was backstage.
I'm just curious as we're going through this, what's the student to
for this this whole project?
Not enough.
Not
Not
enough.
It's almost
It
like
was me.
it's one to
It
one.
was
It
Amanda.
really, it kind of needed to be.
It was me and
It sounds
14.
like it's one-to-one and it clearly could be, so I'm
We
curious
just
how many
never-
were making, because this is.
We never had this many students with IEPs in the program.
Right, and you have case studies, 3 case studies that you're about to go through, and each of those are
Different.
needing their own individual, so I'm curious what was it though?
How many staff could we have?
So in our breakout group, it was 2 of us with 10, all of students with IEPs.
There's maybe 8 of us?
Because there was
8 adults
With
and
like
25
students.
students.
Which it is a lot, but the reason there were so many extras, there's also interpreters. So 3 of the adults are interpreting either for language, but for ASL or Spanish.
It's almost like what we needed was paraprofessionals.
So that was my next question was, you had no paras, it was all just
Yeah, it was,
interesting.
Something that I think we'll reflect on going forward, because this was new for us, but there was so much support for our deaf actors and, and really our students with IEPs, just as we are in our classrooms, right? Like I can't put on a show without paraprofessionals supporting what's going on, so we needed that.
we definitely did.
One more question in
Oh,
relation
yeah.
to the group itself. What was the ratio of students with disabilities or with IEPs, however you put it, versus not? Do you even know?
There was more than half, right?
So that
Oh, it was at least 80%.
Okay, which is opposite in the DOE, if we were to do like a classroom, right?
Yeah, we had the breakdown, because we also had students that were newcomers, and students that were in transition programs who may have moved into the country within the last 2 years that they're, so we had a lot of it was the predominant amount of students who needed support to thrive.
I just want to say I commend both of them and everybody part of it because this is my club. If they have offered, please join them. They do an excellent job of supporting all the kids, and we have they need staff. There's not enough staff, but I have to say everybody who is involved is fully invested in the kids, which is totally different from some of our classrooms. So even though they have interpreters, the interpreters will support as much as they can.
Oh, yeah.
So there's not enough certified teachers, but there are staff that support, and Mike will do an excellent job of making sure we all feel comfortable and
Some of
supported.
the students came with their own one-to-one support,
Yeah.
who would also just jump in wherever needed. So I think there really was that true ensemble sense.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which is
But then also what happens, they think all of this out for us, so thinking out in the minute it's a tremendous support. I just have to mention that.
And that's where I see what you're doing, but this, you've said is a Sunday 5-hour
Well,
thing.
yeah, so we were just saying, like,
So-
all of this, though,
Ha-
this is based on them, but also work with them during the day.
Right, but
You know,
I'm
in a 52-minute
into
class. Oh, yeah.
the feasibility, and I understand, like, I have 2 masters in special ed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm teaching in elementary school,
teaching theater. How do I do this when I see all 540 kids? How do I manage all of this when it's just me in the room with them?
It is hard. And so one of the things that we said in the last session, and something that I always share with teachers, is like sometimes when we talk about universal design for learning and differentiation, and especially design instruction, and we think, oh my gosh, I have a load of 200 kids, I have 500 kids, how do I do this? And so that's when that thought of universal design comes in, and that we can make these changes and they support everyone. Like having a full rehearsal schedule or a full classroom. Like all of these samples, these are all from classrooms. And having this was a 48-minute class. And thinking about that chunking of information, because sometimes we're working where it's just like, even in our minds, like thinking about how am I gonna support all the students and like what are the theatrical practices that happen in a 48, 52-minute class. Like 50% of a theater class is warm-ups and theater gaming and ensemble building. like study after study after study shows that 50% of each class is, you know, vocal warm-up, physical warm-up, and theater games. And it, you know, people hear theater gaming and they're like, but it's a game, but it's not. Theater games are structures to obtain and gather information to put into our productions. You know, that's how we're practicing theatrical skills and building our repertoire as actors. And so when we think about that, it's kind of thinking about like how am I taking my class period so that we can create these mini structures and different things and honor breaks if students need them, but also thinking about like a lot of times we use like poly spots and things like that helping a student understand where their body is in space and proximity to another person is a wonderful thing to be able to do. And these little additions of using the poly spot of where am I supposed to go, or having a taped boundary. You know, you can either tape it if you're in the same spot every day, or if you're, you know, art and art. Listen, I do district arts in a wagon. People make fun of me. I'm like dragging my wagon across the world, but actually it was amazing. But like Michael's bag, it's just cut up folders, laminated, that you just put them down, you know, and then you're creating that space. That it can be something that all of these tiny things like help eliminate those external factors to start working on that theatrical practice. And it does seem daunting and it does seem hard, but like even in the case studies that we're talking about, we realized that this student, as soon as we started giving them choice in their directive that we were offering, the behaviors went away. And it's so interesting, so much of the new research that's coming out in talking about the amount of energy that students on the spectrum of autism put out to be in a space with other people and in their environment. That choice was not escalating, but it was giving them that autonomy of their own self. Does that kind of, like, it's really just thinking about like quick little ways to put into that, and it's hard thinking about that in June, but like if we go to September and think like, how can I build these in at the beginning of the school year?
Sorry, is that we have a 2-minute passing period. So I gotta get class out and get set up for all of that in less than 2 minutes because the teacher usually shows up late. You know, the teacher's usually early. And when do I do that when I just had pre-K and then I'm doing a 4th grade ASD? You know, so.
Oh, Dan then does that.
A lot of it is like being in an auditorium, going into an auditorium from a classroom. I have perhaps a unique perspective on that. Maybe not unique, because some other people in the same boat where I teach in the auditorium. I don't have a classroom of my own. Other people are there. And in some ways it's really nice because we don't have to adjust to going into the auditorium. In other ways it's really annoying because like I was looking at all the wonderful boxes and I'm like, I would love to have that. I cannot have that because it's also where we do busing. I teach in a D75 school, high school. And so I can't have lots of accessible things out in my space because the entire school is in my space without me supervising it every day for a significant chunk of time. So I have to think of like, okay, well everything stays in the shed, but then once I take something out, how can my students be in charge of it in some way? And that's what I was thinking about, like, well, what do I do and what can I do more of with that? And also, one thing that I've sort of done in the auditorium space is, I don't know if other people teaching auditoriums have also done that, is to make a sort of a mini classroom. I use the front stage as sort of like, this is our classroom area, and then outside of that we have taped pathways going in various places. But like you were saying, like have those little taped off areas that in the auditorium, if you have a normal, like you have your that, but if you know where your auditorium is, and if you can take the dimensions of your classroom and be like, okay, this is our classroom area, and then we're gonna go and use our auditorium space. You have that little classroom within the auditorium. I found that to be really helpful because the kids will, if you just like, okay, we're sitting in the audience, they'll bounce off the walls because the space is huge.
Yeah. And it's having that security in that space of knowing where the edges of things are. And I am so excited about the fruitful conversations we've had today. But it is time. But one of the things that, just to say with this student, a big piece of it was helping support their sensory sensitivity, and so it was having those options of a quiet space, having those noise canceling headphones, giving choice to the other student. So one thing that we really wanted to share is that it was really about just like, it's all about knowing the student well and really thinking about what minor to major adjustments that we can start integrating into our practice. And if we're thinking about, starting in September, it's much easier to start this stuff at the beginning of the year as you're meeting students and you're engaging with new students as it goes through the course of time, versus like, it's the end of the year and we're just like all in survival mode, and like really thinking about that. But please email me. For those of you in District 75, we do full day PDs on this type of work. And so, some of my colleagues work within ACES, NEST, Horizons, AIMS, and so if anybody's interested, you can email me, you can come to some of those workshops too. You're more than welcome, and we dive really deep into that kind of work. But thank you so much. I'm so sorry.